Good afternoon, or maybe late morning to some of you guys. Welcome back to Towers Take Live on Facebook. Special edition today, I guess you'd call it, since it's not Thursday at 12:30. It is obviously Friday at noon, and I hope wherever you are, you're having a wonderful Friday at noon. I hope you can enjoy a little bit of your lunch with me. I'm here to speak for Dog Nation, to talk about what's going on within the Dog Nation, around Dog Nation, and a good bit going on for early February. A lot of news surrounding the Georgia athletic program. The biggest news, obviously, this week was National Signing Day, a National Signing Day, which I'm really glad that I said beforehand, expect a ho-hum signing day. I guess it was relatively ho-hum from the amount of action there was. National Signing Day in February, first Wednesday of February, not being what it used to be with the early signing period now, but obviously Georgia got some big bang for their buck, signing the wide receiver George Pickens out of Alabama, five-star wide receiver, flipped him from Auburn, and probably, well, not probably. I mean, certainly less notable was the addition of the tight end from South Florida, from Palm Beach, Brett Seither. But you know what? That's not that wasn't a small thing either. I mean, tight end is a position, and I'll get your comments on Facebook here. Go on there. This is an interactive medium, so let me know what it is you want to talk about or any questions that you might have. But and there's a lot of you there, so I appreciate it. But the addition of Sider, and then a day later, Eli Wolf transferring from the University of Tennessee. Excuse me, got a little bit of a cold going on here. You like those Dog Nation mugs? I hope you got a chance to get one while we were selling those. I don't think we are anymore. Brett Seither, it was a big deal to get him to transfer from Tennessee. Now, he's not the type of guy I think will come in that's going to produce a bunch of big numbers for Georgia. But, like it or not, the reality is the tight end position under Kirby Smart, it's a really important position. People are always complaining about the number of targets and receptions that position gets. Last year, actually, those receptions were up. Isaac Nauta actually had the same amount of catches, I think, last year as a junior as he did as a freshman. But more importantly, they're intimately involved in every snap. And so, when Georgia was left with Charlie Warner, who I think he's really going to be a breakout star for Georgia. Next year, both as a receiver and as a blocker. I mean, he's going to get a lot of reps, number one, and John Fitzpatrick. But, going into spring practice, as much as Georgia uses the tight end position, that was going to be a real strain, just having Charlie Warner and John Fitzpatrick to be able to handle the position in spring practice. That's a lot of reps. Obviously, Rylan Goody, the other signee Georgia has, is recovering from a knee injury. He's not going to be ready to go in the spring. So I think, if nothing else, but from a ability to conduct your business and have proper reps, Eli Wolf and Brett Seither's additions were a big deal. And certainly going into the fall, they're going to need that position to be utilized. But, over and above that, I think Georgia's fine. I think once you get into the season, I think Charlie Warner and John Fitzpatrick are going to do a good job. And I think Eli Wolf is going to immediately step in there and really help Georgia from the standpoint of the number one position of the tight end is to block. And Kirby Smart, James Coley, Georgia's offense utilizes the tight end to a great degree in that regard. A lot of those long runs that you see by DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield last year, and Brian Harrion and James Cook, and those guys have to do with the key blocks being executed by the tight ends out there. A lot of times they're the guys that give you the edge, that give you the tackle, that have to get to the second level and get the linebacker, help out a offensive lineman on a linebacker defensive end. And Charlie Warner is, I think, this is certainly his opportunity to step outside of Isaac Nautis' shadow and show what he's got. And look, I'm here to tell you, he's a great athlete. I believe he's faster than Isaac Nauta. He's bigger than Isaac Nauta. And hey, this is not that I'm not taking anything away from Isaac Nauta. I understand why he decided to test the NFL draft. I think he's going to command great attention and a great salary. I'm not sure where he'll be drafted ultimately, but I think Isaac Nauta is going to do a great job at the combine and do well on the next level. But I don't think Charlie Warner is a step back at all. I think he was, he deferred to Isaac Nauta in a lot of ways, and I think he continues to mature. You got to remember, Charlie Warner as a high school athlete was one of the best high school athletes I'd seen in a long time. He played safety, running back, wide receiver for his school at Raven County. Very, very quick guy. And he's put on a lot of weight, a lot of muscle, and a lot of size at Georgia, but he hasn't lost a lot of that speed. Got to stay healthy. That's the thing about Charlie. He had the foot broken foot, which was not a small thing during Georgia's national championship run in 2017, and I think he's a big playmaker. Now, John Fitzpatrick is a real X factor for me, and it's just because I don't know. I know what I've heard. I mean, his coaches at Marist, I go way back with his coach at Marist, Alan Chadwick. And, I do believe that John Fitzpatrick has very good hands. He's a big guy, sort of growing into his body. He was redshirted last year. I think he's going to. I think he's going to make a bigger impact than most people probably expect. And then you throw in a guy like Eli Wolf. That gives Georgia, that's a plug and play, as Jeff Sintel likes to say. He can come in immediately, understand the offense, be able to give you the big, seasoned veteran size that say you expect from a senior tight end. Really be able to help Georgia on the blocking front, and I would imagine Georgia will get the ball to him some as well too. But as ever, Georgia's offense, it's not a problem, but one of the issues with Georgia's offense is just ball distribution. That was especially difficult last year with Riley Ridley and McCole Hardman. Certainly demanding, not demanding, but commanding, repetitions. And you got DeAndre Swift. This year you're going to have Brian Harriet and James Cook back there. Everybody's going to want to get a look at Zamir White and see what he's got to offer once he's able to get cleared in preseason camp. So where to go with that football is going to be really, really interesting. I like Georgia's wide receiver core. I think the additions to Dominic Blaylock and George Pickens make a big, big difference for Georgia. I think those guys will obviously be tested to see if they can be a viable part of the rotation. But real interesting for me is what's going to happen on the inside, at the flanker position, where essentially you're losing literally McCole Hardman and Akil Crumpton, but to a lesser degree Terry Godwin, who did some stuff in the inside slot receiver position. I don't know, Kyrus Jackson, I think is a guy I'm real eager to see get some reps there. But I think you're definitely going to see Dominic Blaylock be given a lot of opportunities inside at that position. I think Georgia's solid with J.J. Holloman and some of the returning receiver core will finally get a good look, I think, this year at Matt Landers and Tommy Bush as those outside targets for Jake Fromm. James Coley's got a lot to work with, starting with that offensive line and starting with that quarterback. So there's a lot of options, but I do think tight ends will continue to be a big part of the equation, and that's whether it's going to be as a receiver or as a blocker. The other news today, obviously, you had the medical DQ, the apparent medical DQ. I have not been able to get any confirmation, from Georgia. 24/7 Sports reported that Marshall Long uh, was retiring from football, was giving up football as a redshirt junior. To what I'm sure a bunch of you guys probably responded, what, he hadn't already? Um, but all kidding aside, Marshall Long has had a really frustrating college career. He's a guy who came with great fanfare as far as punters go, and just wasn't able to overcome the injury bug. Gets hurt as a freshman, late in his freshman season. He really wasn't having a good year as a freshman. He'd already had started giving up some reps to Bryce Ramsey because the punting wasn't going well. I think he was averaging 38 yards a punt or so, and wasn't having a great year. But then he got hurt in practice. That ends up leading to off-season knee surgery. Aggravated the knee heading into the next year. Georgia gets Cameron Nizilik, suffers another knee injury, another recovery, and loses his job to Jake Camarda and really to Landon Stratton as well this past year. So anyway, the important thing, Marshall Long was on scholarship. I would assume he's a huge candidate to get a medical DQ. Georgia hasn't confirmed that just yet. All their coaches, as you might understand, got out of town Wednesday evening, as I understand it, and those guys are getting a well-deserved break after a long grind. It's been while a lot of us have kind of taken a deep breath since the bowl game ended with the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. Those guys never have. They continued straight out of the bowl game into recruiting, and not really just for those final two spots that they got for 2019, but a lot of work done on the 2020 class. And speaking of that, if you want to read up on it, some great stuff this morning from Connor Riley on his Dog Nation morning update of the 2020 guys, and Jeff Santel as well, all over recruiting. So there's a lot of information about that. Speaking of recruiting, I think that's a good segue to UGA basketball. It appears by all accounts that some big news might be coming down the pipe for Tom Crean's Georgia Bulldogs. Anthony Ant-Man Edwards is going to make an announcement Monday morning down at his school, Holy Spirit Prep. I'm going to be there, and so will Dog Nation, covering that event. Number one player in the country, depending on which recruiting ranking that you go by, regardless of which one you go by, a top 3 player in the nation by all accounts, 6'5" guard. Really impressive guy with the Atlanta Express AAU team, but to Holy Spirit Prep as well. Georgia just desperately needs a player of his ilk. Tom Crean has made it clear from the beginning that he has no problem with one and done guys, and this is a guy that they're very happy they would be very happy to add to have that. He was thought to be a Florida State guy for the longest time, and actually canceled what was supposed to be a visit down to Florida State this weekend. So I think that's very, very encouraging for Georgia. Ultimately, we'll leave it up to Anthony to make his announcement where he's going to go. And that'll be Monday morning between Georgia, Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, Florida State. All those guys, but that would be a huge get for Tom Crean. The Bulldogs fell to 1-8 in the SEC play with a loss to Alabama earlier this week. 10-12 overall. They host Ole Miss on Saturday, tomorrow. I'll be covering that game. Actually, Mike Griffith is going to preview the game. He's meeting with players and coaches over there at the Stegman Training facility this afternoon, and you'll be able to read about that on Dog Nation later. But hey, I love football recruiting. I know you guys too. Everybody does. Football recruiting is so exciting, but basketball, let me tell you, it can really make a difference with just a couple of players. Georgia has a couple of 4 stars already committed under Tom Crean. And then you add this young man to the equation. You got Rayshawn Hammonds and Nick Claxton at the very least coming back next year. I believe 4 or 5 seniors are going to matriculate on out of here. A roster like that's going to look much better for what Tom Crean is trying to do, because right now he's kind of got trying to fit some square pegs and some round holes in terms of running that free movement system that he runs. Nick Claxton fits it well. Rayshawn Hammonds to a lesser degree. Rayshawn Hammonds got to work on his ball handling skills, to get considerably better. Georgia's got some great shooters, in Tyree Crump. But this guy, Anthony Edwards, a difference maker. He's the type of guy that can lift an entire team, as I understand it. I've seen his highlights. I haven't gone to see him in a game, but I hear he brings the skills to the table that not only are good for him, but he's not just give me the rock and let me shoot. He's a penetrator and distributor, and that's really what Georgia needs, really, really bad. Any of you guys who've spent much time watching them this year, and there's a lot of you out there. 7 consecutive sellouts, I think it's been, or 7 sellouts overall at Stegman Coliseum. Georgia plays an exciting brand of basketball. It can be frustrating as heck sometimes, where those turnovers are flying out of bounds and stuff like that. But they're really trying to make it happen the way Tom Crean wants to make it happen. And let's be clear, he made it happen at Indiana. He made it happen at Marquette. He knows what he's doing. He knows what a good player looks like. He knows what offensive football looks like, and offensive basketball looks like, and you give him the right parts, and that's going to be an exciting thing to watch. On other fronts, women's hoops plays on Sunday. Kind of a disappointing year for them, but they got Florida on Sunday, which is always a big deal. I don't think this is particularly good Florida women's basketball team, but they host them on Sunday, and that's an event they're promoting pretty heavily. And baseball just around the corner, and a lot of excitement surrounding Scott Strickland's team. I think I've seen there's a bunch of different rankings for baseball, but I've seen him consistently in the top 10, number 9, number 10, maybe as high as number 6 in one of them. I'm not 100% sure on that. They open the season on February 15th. You'll be able to read about them next week. I'm going to preview their season. So that's kind of a rundown. Let me get to your questions here. What do you got what do you want to know? I'm sorry if I haven't, if I've missed you. If you were trying to get my attention earlier, just please repeat your question. Greg Jones wants to know, is it football season yet? It's always football season, Greg, here at Dog Nation. There's always something going on. So the clock is counting down now, and we'll start previewing Georgia's roster for the spring practice with position-by-position breakdowns as we lead into that. That begins in March. So it's always football season. Phil Rogers wants to know, is the baseball team going to beat Florida and Vandy? SEC baseball is always very, very, very competitive. But I think certainly with I like a lot about Scott Strickland's team. His team has finally reached maturity. And you got guys like Aaron Shunk, real stars that are going to be able to play for Georgia this season. And I suspect they should be able to stand up to the Vandys and the Floridas of the world for sure. Damian Street says Godwin and Hardman are like Brandon Cooks, great at times, but drop the ball in big games. I don't really agree with that on Terry Godwin. I still think Terry Godwin was maybe underutilized and underappreciated at Georgia. Hardman had some notable drops, but there were also some notable misses this year. Georgia just never did get their passing attack fully synced up this season. That's the hope is they'll be able to get that working a little better next season. I do expect Georgia to throw the ball a little bit more. They're going to be heavy run based as always, but I expect them to probably throw the ball a little bit more, under James Coley. Um, it's almost spring camp and no DC. Damian Streets says, please address your DC notification. Clickbait is annoying. I don't know what that is talking about, but yeah, Georgia still hasn't named a defensive coordinator. I think it's clear. I mean, we repeat this every week. Brandon Adams says it on Dog Nation Daily podcast. All my information tells me that Dan Lanning is going to be part of that equation. Whether or not there'll be another part of it, we'll find out. But Kirby Smart clearly is not in a hurry to make this announcement. There may be a little bit more shuffle on the staff. I don't expect anything notable. Georgia is now at 10 full-time assistants. I don't expect anybody else to go anywhere else. But, right now, Georgia's busy trying to really get their support staff back under them. And like I say, I would imagine Kirby Smart is on a remote island somewhere as we speak. So nothing's going to happen in the next few days. I thought we might hear something this week. But if we don't, I don't think there's anything to panic about. Georgia's defensive staff is intact. Kirby Smart knows how to run a defense. Dan Lanning and Glenn Schumann know how to get the defense ready for a game. And sooner or later, all the titles will shake out. There will be, title news coming out on Georgia's staff. I think there's going to have to be a new deal for Sam Pittman. I think James Coley, now that he's sole offensive coordinator, probably going to command another bump. I think Dale McGee, who's, if I'm not mistaken, is already associate head coach, probably continues to get his security enhanced. And then there's the defensive side of the staff, which right now is, Trey Scott, Charlton Warren, Dan Lanning, and Glenn Schumann. So you've got your 10 full-time assistants ready to go. And, how they break out, we'll see. Benjamin Spires wanting to know, where is Nick Cross going? I haven't heard today. I haven't followed that today. I hear it's not Georgia, right? So that's all that really matters. I hear a lot about Maryland and Penn State and maybe Florida State to a lesser degree or something like that. But, Georgia's okay on the defensive backfield front, I think. I think they got a lot of young talent that's going to have to move up, next man up. Kirby Smart and them like to say, and that's what's going to happen on the defensive side. Streets, Damian Streets pointing out that Hardman did drop some passes in the SEC championship. Yes, but I don't, just because somebody drops in a game, drops a pass in a game, nobody catches 100% of their targets. Nobody that's not a professional, and I'm not sure any professionals catch 100% of their targets, but I know what you mean, right? McCole Hardman's a good player, and I think he's going to show out quite well at the combine that he got invited to. Let me hear some more questions from you. Let's see. Notification we got on Facebook: UGA may not name a DC. I don't know what that wasn't, Brad. That didn't have anything to do with me. I would imagine it's probably something that Brandon said on his podcast. And look, Georgia could go all the way into the fall without naming a DC. They don't have to. Nothing says you have to have a defensive coordinator. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they'll probably designate at least Dan Lanning and possibly others as co-defensive coordinator, but I don't think it's anything that is going to change the trajectory of Georgia football, right? It is what it is at this point, and we'll see. Yes, Shane Sutton. I don't generally report on support staff, but I understand a grad assistant with the Miami, and this is not small from the standpoint of Georgia already lost Jay Johnson to a full-time position at another school. He did a great job behind the scenes in Georgia's support staff working with Georgia's quarterbacks, and they lost another graduate assistant going down to join Dan Enos at Miami. So that will be the next task for Kirby Smart and his staff when they get back, is to reinforce the support staff And that's generally when this happens between now and spring practice. Meanwhile, there's an army of guys already working on Georgia's 2019 opponents. Um, James Brown, we don't need a DC. We needed DL. You know what? I agree with you 100%, James Bryant. I think that's the biggest differential right now between Georgia and Alabama. I think if you look at Alabama's recruiting class, which was ranked #1 across the board, I think Rivals ranked Georgia #1 in recruiting. But they just reloaded on the defensive line front, and Georgia's really got to get better on the defensive line. I think Georgia is formidable on the D line from a relative standpoint. I think Jordan Davis was a great find, and they're certainly going to need a lot more this coming season out of their entire D line lot. But they've missed on some major signees, and that can't continue to happen. Let's see what else we have. Zamir White will be cleared for contact in spring. No. Ramon, I'm glad you asked. Absolutely not. I mean, there's no way that I would think that Zeus would be cleared for spring practice. That's one of the reasons I offer caution. Now, this angered a lot of people. I don't know why. But based on the way I understand, ACL recoveries, and in Samir's case, you got 2 on each respective knee. You're a full year before you're ready to go. That would put him in August of this year. I mean, I'm sure he'll be on the field running through plays and everything in spring practice, but he won't be cleared for contact until preseason camp, I wouldn't think. And then I guess it might be questionable on that. But no, haven't heard anything on Cook's weight. Carolyn Peters, I'm getting the 1 minute signal here, so we need to wrap up. Let me see your questions real quick. We'll see. Brian Collette, what do you have here? This is Jake Fromm's junior year. Will he be used more in first and second downs instead of running it up the gut? Yeah, that was pretty frustrating last year. A lot of times Georgia was bringing in Justin Fields on some of those first downs. Georgia's a run-first team, and sometimes that means running it up the gut. Sometimes it means off tackle. Sometimes it means around the end. But Georgia's always going to try to establish the run, and you usually do that on first and second down. That said, Georgia's a play-action team, and they make some of their biggest plays on first and second down off play-action fakes. That'll be the case again this year. Billy Mathis is where are you on scholarships? As I understand it, you're at 84. That's including Marshall Long's apparent medical DQ. That would give Georgia room to add one more. They don't necessarily will, but there's the wide receiver from Miami that apparently they're considering as a graduate transfer, and a lot of other possibilities. But I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia also kept a scholarship going into the fall. Ramon, I don't think we're going to hear about the Butts-Mehre expansion. It's not a weight room expansion. It's a football addition, is what a football facility addition, a football building addition. My understanding is that might be shelved into the fall. But it's coming. Okay, that doesn't mean that it won't immediately come online. I just they've shoved the discussion right now because there's just way too much chatter about it. Yes, they're trying to put weight on James Cook. We'll see how that comes out. James Cook's got a lot of improvement to make from his freshman and sophomore year. They want more size on him, better understanding of the playbook, the whole 9 yards. Yes, Miss Peters, Wolf does use a scholarship coming as a graduate transfer. That's about all the time we have, y'all. I appreciate it. We will be back at our regular time next Thursday for Towers Take Live on Facebook. That'll be at 12:30 next week. Brad Colbert, what's your way too early prediction for win-loss? Let's just say over and under. I'd say the over and under on Georgia is probably 11 wins. So let's just stick with it right there, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got over. Let's put it that way for now. I got a long way to go before I'm ready to pull the trigger on that. Um, Lots of stuff coming up on Dog Nation. Lots of updates coming this afternoon from Mike Griffith, Jeff Sentell. I may have something there. Connor Riley. Thanks for hanging out with me for a few minutes and on a Friday afternoon. And we'll catch you next Thursday at the same time. Towers Take Live on Facebook. Thanks for hanging out with me, y'all. See you then.